So today we're talking about the worst advice that you could give to a victim and why it's such bad advice and why we're tempted to give it. We almost have sort of this fascination with victims, and that we put the whole ownership on what happens in these toxic relationships on the person who's getting out or the person trapped in the relationship. We ignore the fact that this person has been deceived, then they have been gaslit. We ignore the fact that they have been basically conned. We act like everyone should be totally astute and understand all the underlying, underpinning causes, reactions, reasons, meaning of everything that happens in these relationships. And we don't understand the fact that there are predators among us that are really good. I think that makes us super uncomfortable to recognize that there are actually people who are so good at this predatory kind of mindset that they can fool us into thinking that it's something that it's not. And so today I want to talk about what happens and why we believe that it's this way, the bad advice that we often hear or give, what contributes to the public's ignorance about toxic relationships and toxic dynamics, as well as the underlying causes that's going on with the narcissist. I want to get into some of that as well, about what happens to the narcissist that caused them to create such a successful mask that fools us into thinking that they're not that malicious, they're not that cruel, or they're not that sophisticated. So I want to get into that as well. And how to recognize, I want to wrap it up today with how to recognize that maybe you have a partner or a friend or a loved one or a family member that is not the best support person that you could have. How do you know that your person is not really your person? Because often we end up thinking, oh, they mean well, they just don't know what to say. We offer excuses for them without realizing the fact that this person maybe doesn't mean well. Maybe this person actually is not that healthy, or maybe they actually are rooting for your failure or your pain. Because sometimes, without us realizing it, we've surrounded ourselves with people who are just as toxic as the person that we have been in a relationship with. So I'm so thrilled that you're here today. For those of you who are new to me, new to this channel, new to this platform, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist, a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of counseling. These days, I primarily support victims in healthy relationships, really try to unpack, that's a great word. I try to unpack narcissism, narcissistic relationships, everything that happens to victims so that we can be better informed, so that you can heal and you can have given yourself the tools to avoid these relationships going forward. So I'm thrilled that you're joining me. I hope you'll stick around because we're going to get into a lot of material. I know some of you have questions for me, like you'd love to ask me. If you can stay till the last, I go for an hour, but if you can stay for the last 15, 20 minutes, I will promise I'll take your questions. So if you can really save your questions until the end, I promise we'll get back to them. Okay, so why does the public persist in believing that toxic relationships is really something that happens bad between two equal people? Why do we have this blindness to toxicity? Now, I'm so excited. Do you guys know the wife that is featured in the movie, The Wolf of Wall Street? In the movie, I think she's called Naomi. Well, in real life, her name is Nadine, and she's actually on TikTok and YouTube. She's everywhere. She's Dr. Nay. So Dr. Nay is actually the real life survivor, the real life wife of the man who's featured in The Wolf of Wall Street. And I got to interview her this week. I got to interview her yesterday, actually. And we got into this topic, her and I and Lisa, because it's upcoming podcast. If you'd like to see that podcast, it will drop on January 13th. So it's going to be the second week of January. You're going to get to see Nadine share about trauma bonds, love bombing, her understanding. This is a woman who survived it with somebody that we kind of got to, I heard that film made over $500,000. That's incredible. But so she's now become an expert in this realm of narcissistic abuse. So we got to talking about, why did everybody put all this onus, all this burden, all this blame on victims? And this is her belief. She said that she thinks that as a society, because of patriarchy, we really have an attachment to hierarchy. Now, she's also a psychologist like myself. So she believes it's because we like to see things as a hierarchy. And so we believe then that people who then are in should see what's happening to them. They should see this downstream problem, the fact that the person above them is not that good and that they have a responsibility for it. I agree. I think that is part of the problem. I do believe part of it is just the degree that I also think, yeah, the degree that there's hierarchical relationships, but I also think that some of the problem is because that we also believe that people are fully independent and autonomous. I don't think we like the idea that there are vulnerabilities. I don't think you, for example, if you walked into a store and you admit you don't want to face the fact that the reason you're in that store is because of the successful advertisement. I don't think we like to understand the degree that there are hooks and that you bought maybe the brand of deodorant you're using because of Procter and Gamble's really great messaging, that you've been susceptible to powerful subconscious and conscious messaging. I don't think we like to know that your behavior isn't as much under your control as you like to think that it is. And this also happens in relationships, that we get into relationships and where we also are under the control of other people. And I don't think we like to admit that people can have sway and influence on us, and they can shape us and direct us into doing things that we don't want to do, or getting into commitments that maybe isn't for the best of us. I think that's really uncomfortable for us to realize that all of us are prone and vulnerable to being victims. So we have this need almost to see everyone as being in full control of themselves, that your life is what you make it. But the truth of the matter is, it really isn't as it isn't really that isn't true. That's what I'm trying to say. That really actually isn't true. It is not under as much as under your control as you'd like to think it is. I think often I use this example of Bernie Madoff. Think of who he was bilking. He was trying to fool other millionaires, billionaires who had investments. He wanted somebody who understood what it meant when they saw an S or a REO, or they understood what an SCAP is, or they understood the fact that there's purchase price versus real value price of a particular stock. They understood what investment rates should be, or what selling short term or what selling short meant. They understand all this terminology, and maybe they'd done a lot of it themselves. He was talking to other experts in the field, and that was, yes, he also convinced and bilked mom and pop and grandma with her retirement fund, absolutely. But he is also pursuing people who were knowledgeable in these areas, and he successfully convinced them that he was the right man for the job, that they should trust their investment portfolio with him, only to find out that he wasn't trustworthy at all. How could he succeed? And by the way, I bet he was mostly pursuing men like himself. So this isn't a gendered problem. It wasn't a man pursuing a woman. This was between two people who should have been, if you think about it, between two equals, only it wasn't an equitable situation. And they didn't realize that this person was a liar, that he was a cheat, that he had planned to take advantage of them. They didn't know that they were entering into a relationship in which there was no equity, no equality, no justice going to be in this relationship. But we don't like that, because I think it makes it hard for us to sleep at night. I think that's the honest truth. We don't like it because we don't want to admit that we're actually fish in an ocean and we are living among sharks, that there are people who are around us, talking to us, having relationships with us, that are actually sharks. So it's easier for us then to say, well, it's not me. That would never happen to me. I'm more sophisticated than you. I can spot people who have glaring red flags. I can spot when someone says some emotionally appealing statement and know that there's no truth in that. No, you can't. In fact, I was listening to a body language expert said that the latest studies on ability to detect a lie is no better than a coin toss. Your ability to spot a lie is no better than if I pulled a quarter out right now and started tossing it and guessing whether it was going to be heads or tails. But we don't like that reality. That makes us feel super, super uncomfortable. So I think part of the reasons that we victim blame is because that we don't want to be a victim. We don't want to in any way associate with the risk of that. So where I'm heading with all of this is it is common for us to tell victims they should just leave. And what we ignore is the fact that this person is in a dangerous relationship with someone who's constantly moving the goalpost, with someone who's using all sorts of emotional and literal blackmail and intimidation and threats and guilt tripping to keep this person in the relationship. That they're in a relationship with someone that's using what George Simon calls responsibility avoidant tactics in order to convince them that change is happening when there's no change at all. That all of that is super uncomfortable. But here's some, I want to tell you the 10 damaging things that we can tell a victim that we should never say to them that shows our ignorance about toxic relationships. Okay, they are, it takes two to tango. Now, you know what? I'm going to admit something that's really uncomfortable. I used to say that in the office to clients. It takes two to tango. I certainly have heard it. I remember hearing it right after I got out of that toxic relationship. I had a date with somebody, and I did see the predatoriness of this guy, and we did not have a second date. But in that date, he had the audacity. Now, should I have told him that I'd come out of an abusive relationship? No, but I was really fresh and I didn't know better. And I told him that I was writing a book and that I'd come out of this really toxic relationship. And he looked at me and he said, well, my ex and I used to talk about people like you in that relationship, even that people like you. There's another red flag. And he said, we agree that it takes two to tango. No, it doesn't, because the assumption is that everybody's cards are fully on the table and that I saw that you've been holding an ace back and that you're going to play it at the key moment and you're going to trigger in a direction that's going to take advantage of me. That I understand that you're doing that to me. No, I don't. I remember, I know I've been sharing this lately because I've been thinking about it, is that my ex was in therapy the entire time. My ex actually made it look like, took the car, we only had one car for a period of time, took the car to this appointment and then came back at the end of the appointment and it looked like he went. I didn't know that he'd stashed the car and his phone in a location so he could do God knows what during that period of time. The only reason I found out was because his therapist happened to text, and I don't know how I even saw that. He said, hey, I missed you at the session. Would you like to reschedule? That's the only reason I found out he didn't go. So I'm supposed to somehow know this person's doing that and that they're not really doing the work of counseling and therapy to get better. I'm supposed to know that? How am I supposed to know that? It looks like it. If you use the analogy, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, he's looking like he's doing therapy. He's gone for the therapy hours. He's coming back and talking to me about therapy, what he's talked about in therapy. It walks like a duck, looks like a duck, sounds like a duck. Isn't it a duck? No, actually, there are some people who are that good to give you all of that, and then actually there's no change. How would I know? Well, only through time. I would only know through a period of time that there is nothing that's different about this person. So maybe either he's seeing a really bad therapist, or he's ignoring everything he's hearing in therapy, or he's lying to me and he's not actually going to therapy, or he's lying to me and he's ignoring what he's hearing in therapy. But it takes time to know that. So the idea that it takes two to tango completely misses the point. It assumes way too much that's not actually true. Okay, here's number 2 that we say to victims that is a terrible thing to say. Why didn't you leave sooner? With the assumption of that somehow we should have known there's no hope. We should know this person's potential is a lie. We should know that the mask that we met when we met them never existed and it was actually a form of manipulation. We should know that. How do you know? Do you walk into every relationship and say, am I meeting the real person? Do you ask yourself, do you know, okay, is this just a fluke that they had a bad day and this is a unusual situation and maybe this is, I shouldn't attribute too much to it, or is this a sign this is going to go really wrong and I want out of here? You know, a lot of us get into these realms knowing what we know, and we assume that because we've now became a master expert at toxic behavior and toxic people and spotting narcissistic abuse, that other people should be as good as we are. They're not. I wasn't. I wish, in fact, I miss that innocent person that didn't know people could be that deceptive. I didn't know that. Or that I was that hopeful and in a way a little gullible. I didn't know that. So when we say to someone, why didn't you just leave sooner? We're discounting all the complexity that they're facing, the ambiguity, the confusion, the cognitive dissonance, the false information they're receiving from the person, the gaslighting, all of this that leads them not for sure what's really real, not for sure which perceptions they can and cannot trust. Okay, number 3, things that we say to victims that are the worst things we could ever say is, they don't seem that bad to me. I cannot tell you how many versions I've heard of this. Like, you're the end-all be-all expert of my partner. Like, where are you in the house to know what actually is happening or not happening? What makes you a psychological expert on a person and a person's behavior to know whether or not it's that bad or too bad or not bad enough or whatever? I find, yeah, you know, the other one I hear online, people say to me, well, I haven't heard this other person's version. You need to hear their other person. Who asked you to be judge and jury to determine whether or not my relationship is healthy or not healthy? I find it really like wild how we take these positions of superiority, like we get to weigh in on a victim's life experiences and when they should or shouldn't leave a relationship. Okay, number 4, we say to them, you're being too sensitive. Or, you know, everybody has a bad day or whatever. Again, we start to then gaslight people. And I think what we fail to do in these situations is we fail to really listen to how uncomfortable it is, back to where I started today, talking about that we just don't like the idea that abuse actually exists, that there are that kind of dangerous people in the world. So we then somehow discount and gaslight the person who's trusting us with really highly, in a way, sensitive and probably confidential information. We should have like seen that as a gift, a privilege, an honor that this person's extending to us. Okay, statement number 5 that we say that is terrible advice to victims, and that is, well, at least they're a good parent or a good provider or a good whatever, you fill in the blank to whatever it is. Which is ironic, because that in that moment says your pain, what you're experiencing, isn't important except for that person's perception of it. In other words, you coming to them, talking about all of this and sharing the vulnerability, that isn't enough, that they somehow then are going to negate all of that because at least the person is a good parent. By the way, anybody who's bad to the parent of their child, I don't care whether it's a man or a woman, if you're terrible to that child's father or you're terrible to that child's mother, you're not good to the child, because that's not in the child's best interest. That already, and to me, just nullifies everything that you're doing as good for the child. So it's just kind of ridiculous. And you know who tends to say that? That's either busybody neighbors or well-meaning in-laws who really don't want the relationship to go, you know what I'm saying, go under. Okay, thing number 6. Well, you just need to forgive and move on. And I know that gets said any kind of religious circle. You just need to forgive and forget. Or, you know, we're really instructed to forgive. Or, you know, we should learn to turn the other cheek. You get some kind of version of that. What we forget to think about in that situation is that being angry and feeling hate and all of these negative emotions isn't part of healing. And it isn't necessarily forgiving, doesn't mean we forget, and it doesn't mean we continue to put up with abuse. It really doesn't. We need to see that that's a toxic, just a toxic thing that actually is not biblical. It's not Christian. It's not good religion. There's nothing out there that says that there are certain people, think about really what you're saying, that there are certain people in the world who get a get out of jail card for whatever they do, no matter how atrocious or disgusting it is. And that it's the rest of us to let go of that it's our job to let go of it. Then we should then do away with all the prisons out there, because then there's no reason for them, right? I mean, let's think about that. Think about the illogicalness of that statement. what it really is, I'll tell you what the person's saying when they say that. They're actually saying, translation, I don't like hearing what you're talking about. It's bothering me. So I'm going to shut you up with a thought terminating statement so that you get off this topic and move on. That's actually what they're saying. So remember that next time you hear that. Number 7, well, maybe they didn't mean it like that. Well, again, that just sort of overlooks a psychological wound and ignores the fact that people have boundaries. You had a boundary, don't hurt me, whatever it is. Don't cheat on me, don't lie to me, don't withhold money from me, don't call me that name, whatever it is. And they're just saying, well, okay, so they did that, but that doesn't really matter. Your boundary doesn't matter. We just need to sort of always give them sort of the leeway for that. It's just hogwash. Number 8, I think you're being too dramatic. I'll never forget. I had somebody I was seeing years ago, and I was telling him, because I was writing the book, that it was really bad. And I didn't want to get in with this guy, what really bad meant, that this person that I was in a relationship most likely was poisoning me for the life insurance money that I'd come into. I didn't really want to share that. To me, that, first of all, it sounds crazy. Most people are like, what? I mean, how do you know? And I don't want to then have to start to explain all the symptoms that I had and all, what was happening and why I suspect that, and how even his other wife believed that happened to her too, that I wasn't the first person he tried to poison. I was actually the second person, maybe even the third person, who knows? But I didn't want to get into all of that. So I just said it was bad. And I remember breaking up to him, and when we broke up, I said, yeah, he tried to kill me. And thank you so much, guys. And when I said that guy's mouth dropped and he said, what? I said, yeah, he tried to kill me. Well, I didn't know you meant that bad. And my thought was, well, who are you to ever judge on what's bad? Why can't we just take what someone says and believe them? If it's bad, it's bad. Let me give you another example. For those of you who follow me, know that I'm a survivor of catastrophic sexual abuse. Catastrophic. I rarely hear stories as ugly and as bad as mine. Just rarely. Thank God. I don't want that for you. You know what? I don't walk around acting like I'm somehow SA police and think that I have the corner on what constitute really terrible assault. So that if you tell me that you got whatever in some, lesser degree, like as if there's a continuum from 0 to 10, and I was maybe a 15, and you were only a 7 on this continuum, that I get to determine that you really shouldn't complain because it wasn't that bad. What? It was bad to you? That's all that mattered. What matters is your experience of it, not my experience. There's no big like cosmic scoreboard, like, oh, Kerry scored really high on SA. She gets the, master whatever. And we don't do that way. And we don't do that with pain. We shouldn't do that with what's bad. We shouldn't do it with being dramatic. We shouldn't do it around sensitivity. We should hear every single person when they share their story. We should hear that impacted you. You have feelings about that. That's affected you. You're upset about that. And that's all that matters. That should be all that matters. Not how it compares to some bigger picture or whoever had it. We're not in some, as I think Lisa put it, some Olympic event for worst trauma. We're not. We're not competing for gold in trauma. So we need to be really careful and not gaslight people around whatever it is, whether it's too dramatic or too sensitive or not that bad or whatever. Okay, number 9 of the worst things that we say to victims is, you're going to regret leaving. You know what? The victim already has enormous self-doubt about leaving. They already don't know what's real or not real. We shouldn't add to this by making them have more confusion about this massively big decision where every option around leaving feels like a loss. It already is tremendously loaded. It's not like being able to choose door 1, like make a deal. Door 1 between the vacation to Hawaii and door 2 between a new car. It's not like that. It's already like, do I have this person taking custody of my kids? Do I lose everything that gave me stability in my life? I mean, do I also maybe even lose my own safety and well-being? I mean, that's what it feels like. It's loss, 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 loss. And we're going to say to them, you're going to regret leaving. Maybe you should really rethink this. That's a terrible thing to say. Don't say this to somebody. And this is the final thing that we say to victims that we really shouldn't say is, well, you're lucky it wasn't worse. Worse against what? Okay, here's the other thing I thought was mind-blowing when we started to look at the research. And right now I'm working on the book called Feeling Unreal. It's around depersonalization. What is it? How does it happen? Who does it happen to? And so depersonalization is part of the continuum of dissociative disorder. So people who struggle with like numbing, checking out, losing a sense of themselves, losing a sense of reality, they looked at all sorts of trauma. They looked at physical abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence in the home, and neglect and emotional abuse. Guess what group had the most dissociative problems? Were more likely to be susceptible to depersonalization and derealization? Emotional abuse was the most vulnerable. And they found that those that were even the more vulnerable was when both parents did it. When both parents were involved with the neglect and emotional abuse, that group had the most frequent reports of depersonalization and derealization. So think about what that means. That means that when you have this chronic state of being neglected, when you don't know what's emotionally real, when you're starting to challenge your own perception of reality and what you feel, then you no longer know what's real, and you start to lose connection with yourself, and you start to can't know even if you're real and if you're connected to you. You lose this connection to you. So you're lucky if it wasn't worse. Emotional abuse is worse than physical or sexual. When it comes to some kinds of damage come from trauma, they already had it worse. It is worse. So anyway, that was just the 10 top worst things that we can say to a victim about what they've experienced. So why does this happen? Why, as a public, are we so kind of obtuse about abuse and abusive situations? One is, I just don't think we understand the power of control. I had this conversation earlier with Lisa. We were taping today guilt tripping and why it takes victims generally somewhere between 4 to 7 times leaving before the leaving sticks. So those are a couple other podcast episodes that are coming up on breaking free from narcissistic abuse. And she was talking about, Kerry, the reason they do all of this is just about control. And at first I thought, that sounds awfully simplistic, that everything about the narcissist and the cluster B personality types like antisocial personality disorder really kind of boils down to control. But think about it this way. Toxic people don't want vulnerability. In fact, they think the bid for connection, you needing emotional connection, is a weakness. They see that as, because they exploit it, it's a weakness. So they wouldn't be that way. They don't want to be exploited by themselves or other people, and they even think you might exploit them. So they don't want anything like that. What they want that gives them power is control. To control is a way to get power. So if you get to make the rules, you get to hold the rules, you get to even force people to give how much that they give or don't give, you have a lot of power. So what we as a public don't understand is that it is all about power and control. It's not about love and it's not about risk. It's about power and control. I think the other thing is we don't understand the complexity of a trauma bond, that this is a psychological condition that is almost a form of brainwashing. We don't understand that our natural need to connect, that we are hardwired for belonging, and we're hardwired for relationships, that there are those among us who've gotten so sophisticated at understanding this to know how to create an image of it happening without actually providing it. Let me give you, for instance, somebody just recently reached out to me and asked if we could get together. Now, I already knew what this was. This was not a catch up. This is a guy who's looking for something. I could already smell something not good about it. So I said, hey, yeah, I'd love to meet for coffee. Let's catch up. So I'm already putting it in a safe place where, the situation already is going to dictate what this is. It's a chat. That's all we're having, a chat. I said, let's meet for chat for coffee or whatever. I'd love to catch up. And he said, well, when will it work? And he threw out, I said, well, it won't work this week, but maybe the weekend. He goes, oh, that's too bad. I'm working. And I said, well, I guess we'll have to wait until next week. And he goes, well, okay, so we have to wait till next week, but I sure wish I could see you sooner. All right, now why did he say that? I sure wish I could see you sooner. I'm really disappointed. Does this person really have that? Why, after so many years, would he circle back and want this and then push for urgency? What he's doing when he did that was appeal for my need to feel special and to have someone want to see me and make me feel like they've been thinking about me, so that I would then somehow relax my boundary and move the date forward against my best interest, right? If he meant it sincerely, he would say, oh, that's a bummer. I can't wait to see you. I'm really looking forward to our appointment, right? But instead, he throws this out. Now, he's not offering him to make a shift off his appointments on the weekend, but he's hoping somehow I will relax my boundary. Now I know he's manipulating me. So what I did was I said, is there a reason for the urgency? So I confronted him, and he said no, and then never said another word, because all of that was a play. It was a lie that was appealing to me so that I would somehow let down my boundary so that he could then take advantage of that and move it forward. See, what we don't understand is that that's the kind of sophistication that victims run into on a regular basis, that it's a catch. They don't catch the fact that normal conversations are being used as bait and hooking us and trapping us and making us think there's more feelings, more connection. They're using literally the bid for connection against us. Think about that. That is so evil. That is such a sophisticated, complex form of manipulation, and that's what's happening to all the survivors in toxic relationship. People have gotten that good. By the way, this guy is a kid. He's a kid, and he's already that good. At 32, he's already figured this out. And I hate to say that it's taken me to get into my 60s for me to identify that kind of toxicity. That's how behind the curve we are with victims, helping victims to learn, no, this guy's not sincere. If he was sincere, he wouldn't have dropped off the earth. If he was sincere, he would respect that you're very busy and be concerned about that. That's what sincerity looks like. This is manipulation. This is not sincerity. So we just, as a public, don't understand abusive situations. We also have cultural biases and myths. We really believe that people are better than they are, that people are nicer than they are, that we should somehow prioritize family and relationships above everything else, and that when someone does something wrong, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt. No, we need to get better at protecting victims, bottom line, all the time. We need to stop elevating, protecting, watching out for, excusing predatory and toxic behavior. Instead, just see it for what it really is. Okay, the other reason why we struggle with this is because we don't understand the narcissist mask. We keep thinking that the person that we meet, even the public thinks that the person they met in your narcissist or in your toxic person is the real person. They don't know that that's a curated image designed in order for them to look good. I know that. When I lived with this guy, I knew that there is the man that he actually was, that today, to be honest with you, I don't really think I ever knew him. I don't think I want to know him. I think who my ex really is such a bad person, such a scary person, that I would find it shockingly horrifying. I don't even have a word. I don't think there's a word exists to the degree that I think the real self, that he lives out of his shadow to such an extent that I would be beyond disgusted. I'd be beyond horrified that he has turned himself into a nightmare of a person. I really think that. But the person that you would get to meet, if you met him on the street, is such a nice guy. He's attractive. He dresses well. He's nice to his mother. He shows up for her. He would carry your stuff to the car, and you would never know that while you're sitting with him, if you're a woman, he's sitting there in his head and he's already abusing you. You don't know that. And the public doesn't know that. I think that we really don't understand that the mask, that the person that we meet in public, and this goes for everybody who's a narcissist or really like on the antisocial personality disorder realm, I don't think we realize that persona is false. It's deliberately created in order to trick you and to make you think this person isn't who they actually are, that they are really wolves in sheep's clothing. They really are. And as a public, we don't understand that. We have this massive confusion and we believe what we see, and then we get angry with victims for believing what they see when we're believe what we see. I think we have a big, and I also think that we are gaslit along with the public's gaslit as well. They gaslight everybody. I also think that we don't understand the terrible damage that emotional abuse causes, that we have this hierarchy of abuse. I already talked about the abuse Olympics, that we kind of like have people in an abuse Olympics thinking there's a sort of like, there's then minimizing and deflecting, and then there's gaslighting, and then there's, calling someone a bad name, and then there's actually putting hands on them, and then there's betray. I mean, we have this hierarchy of what we think is from not great to terrible. It's not actually, it doesn't work that way. That's not how the mind registers abuse. It literally can't separate that. It even shows that just neglecting someone's emotional bid and pretending and acting as if that person doesn't exist is as painful to them as if you struck them. It really isn't a whole lot different. The mind doesn't rate those things differently. But somehow we have this, like I said, scoreboard that we love to keep, and then we like to tally everybody and said, well, somehow you don't tally up high enough. This is not, we don't consider this across the threshold of damage, when really to that person it could be the most damaging thing ever. I once heard, this was about grief, that we also do this with grief. We think that there's worse grief and better grief. There's not. Grief is grief. We forget, and I think this comes out of the person who worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross around grief, and his name is, Kessler. I think his last name is Kessler, Mike Kessler. He said this in a podcast episode to Brene Brown, that what matters is that your pain is the worst. There's no such thing as worse pain. Your pain is the worst. There really is. Your pain is the worst. The fact that it happened to you, it shouldn't have happened to you. And because it happened to you, it's the worst pain for you. And that's all that really matters. We need to sort of do away this idea of a scoreboard. I think the other thing is we have this cognitive bias about the world that we live in. Something is a just world, that bad things happen for certain reasons. We really want to make everything make sense. And I hate to tell you, it just often doesn't make sense. We live in a world that is not just, where people who are good have bad things that happen, and people who are bad somehow escape the justice they deserve. We need to sort of realize that life is not that simplistic, and that I think of a Bible verse in Psalms. It says, the rain falls on the good and the evil. That's true. The rain falls on all of us, and the sun comes out for all of us. We need to keep thinking that because it does come out for this person, that somehow they're a good person, or if it rains on somebody else, that means they're a bad person. That's just not how it works. We live in a world in which is really privileged, and some of us have had a lot better access to things, access to opportunities. And here's something I said to somebody that I knew that was shocked. Oh, I know where it was. I had an interview with Dr. Z on Instagram. She's another psychologist over there. And I said to her, the ability to leave is a privilege. I bet you never thought about that most victims really struggle to leave. And those of us who have the opportunity to get out, we've been privileged. We either had lucky enough of the right people in our life to support us in the right way, or the right job to be able to give us the right breaks, or we had the right opportunities for us to get out, or we had whatever. We were privileged. Not everybody has the privilege of leaving. And that's another reason why it's just terrible to tell the victims they should leave. And also, we end up believing what we see on media. We end up thinking that there is justice, and like CSI, the bad guy always gets caught, or it doesn't. I'm even thinking of that movie that they remade with Harrison Ford. The truth comes out. No, unfortunately, the truth doesn't always come out. Sometimes we live in a world where people get away with stuff and things are unfair, and it's just not going to be the way that you wish it was, and it doesn't wrap up like it does on a movie. All right, so I know that I've gone long, and I'm going to give these really fast and quick so we can have time to talk to you. And Echo Chamber, I'm so thrilled that you're here, guys. If you're not following the Echo Chamber, she's right now on TikTok. Please follow her. She just sent me a gift. Thank you so much for that. Her and I are friends, and I deeply, deeply appreciate her. All right, how to know that you have somebody in your life who's not a good support person. Maybe even they're toxic. Watch for these signs, and that will warn you that this is not a good person that you should be confiding in. Because really start to evaluate before you open your mouth and start to tell what's happening to you. Consider these things. Start to watch for these things. Number one, dismissive body language. Are they eye rolling? That's a sign of contempt. Have they crossed their arms? That's a blocked body. Are they not making good eye contact with you? That might show disinterest or impatience. Are they interrupting or shifting the focus elsewhere? Or are they looking at their phones or showing a lack of engagement? They have given you a sign this person's not ready or not in the space to listen. Okay, watch for this. Quick solutions or platitudes. If they give you what's called a thought terminating cliche, what it basically is a shutdown comment, like, well, things happen for a reason, or it takes two to tango, or, we should all learn to forgive and forget. If you get some kind of like statement like that, that's a, I don't want to hear more. I'm shutting it down. I'm not in the space for that. So watch for somebody who gives you some kind of quick solution or platitude. I also call it toxic positivity. It also can be known as spiritual bypassing. So religious people will do it by giving you a verse. Remember, you need to cast all your cares on Jesus because he loves you. Yeah, that's true. But you know what? It doesn't solve the fact that I'm in trouble right now and I'm feeling a lot of pain. So watch out for that. If somebody does that, this is the wrong person to be talking to. Number 3, defensiveness or judgment. Anybody who questions you or challenges you, or instead of just showing up and listening, this is not a healthy person. This is a very judgmental, critical, possibly toxic person. Excessive focus on the abuser, giving them excuse, justifying them, acting like playing devil's advocate like they represent them. That is not a person who's in your corner. That's a person who's working against you, who's actually already taken a side and it's not yours. Minimization of the abuse, like it's not that bad, or all couple fight, or that doesn't sound that serious, or starts to laugh when you tell them about what happened, or one-ups you. They one-up you with another story. That, again, that's a person who doesn't give you space to be in a bad spot and to struggle. They're impatient and changing the subject. Number 7, they act skeptical. Number 8, they're focusing on the appearance, like, well, they're always so great to me. Number 9, there's actually competition. I just mentioned that already. They one-up you. That's another bad sign. Number 10, they just can't handle the emotional difficulty. They seem uncomfortable. They seem like they'll say things like, well, I don't know what to say. That shows you this person lacks the emotional tools to know how to show up and really be supportive. So what do you do when this is happening to you? What do you do when you feel super embarrassed, you're needing, you're maybe even feel like you're emotionally bleeding and you're looking for help? Man, I had this happen to me 2 weeks ago. I had a bad encounter with somebody that I love, somebody in my family that really undid me. And I realized that in that moment, I didn't have anybody close to me that week to be able to step up and help me. These are things that you can do that really help. 1, validate your own reality. Show up for yourself. Anchor yourself in the truth. Remind you that this is hurtful and that it's not your fault. Set boundaries with people who are not being supportive, but also people who are being harmful to you. Start to limit your conversations. Start to choose your audience really careful. Number 3, educate whenever it's appropriate. Sometimes it's not. Not everybody deserves to know all the backstory. Not everybody do you have to spend the energy with trying to educate about what abuse is. But sometimes with some people, educate when it's appropriate. Number 4, find a healthy, supportive community, which you guys know I talk all the time about Toxic Free Relationship Club. We have 2 levels. We have the community level for $15 a month. Then we have the club level with the weekly lives, book club, all of that built in. Again, I've always said to you multiple times, don't let budget be your guide. If you say, I want a chat community, then sign up for the community. And if you can't afford it, let me know. If you need the higher level of the club, which I think is the better option, and you can't afford $75 a month, come to me and say, Kerry, I can afford 20. Can I get into the club for 20? Can I get into the club for 30? Absolutely. You and I can make an arrangement. Find trauma-informed professionals. That's always super helpful. And here's the other thing that I really want you to do that I do for myself all the time. Learn to show up for yourself as your own support person, as your own parent. I heard one of the best helpful advice years ago from my own therapist who said to me, when you get discombobulated about something, ask yourself, is this an old feeling or a new feeling? Because old feelings are triggers into the past, into our childhood, areas that we have this massive, like, gaping hole and we don't know what to do with. She said, when you say it's an old feeling, then I want you to show up as your own mom or your own best friend. Say the things that these people who really love you would say to you. And when it's a new feeling, you already know what to do because you're a very capable, resourceful adult. And then finally, know when to walk away from a conversation that's just going wrong. You don't need to stay. I'll tell you guys, there was one time I was on a phone with somebody for an hour who was being abusive to me. And somebody afterwards, when I told them about it, they said, why did you just not hang up? It's like, oh yeah, I can hang up. And you can walk away. If you get into one of these bad relationship situations where this person's just piling on, say, hey, thanks a whole lot, turn around and walk away. You do not need to stay. All right, that's my talk on today on bad advice, why we just fail to show up for victims. I'm so thrilled that you're here. Now let's talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. You guys stayed and you stuck around to the end, so I'm going to actually stay over today to make sure that I have the time to give to you for being here. So what is it that you would like to know about why we struggle to just leave, or why people struggle to be good supports to us? You notice I got my glasses on so I can now see. Yeah, so I'm now waiting for your questions. I'm going to start to go back through TikTok and see what other people that happen, because you guys all know that I just talk for a while. Yeah, I agree. Lachelle, it's so important for us to evaluate who we're talking to. We really need to do that. And thank you so much, Echo Chamber, for this. I appreciate it. Yeah, and you also said I had to stop learning. I stopped doing this. I had to stop doing this because I was doing this the hard way. Yeah, thought terminating cliches, Ravana. That is a fascinating thought. I'd never heard of it until recently. I've been following on Instagrams called word, not worst, word _ case _ scenario. So think of the worst case scenario, but it's not. It's word _ case _ scenario. She talks about thoughts terminating cliches all the time. She's actually a PhD in English and in rhetorical English, and it's when somebody throws a comment when there's really nothing to say. So if it's something wrapped up as really like captures it all, and it sort of leaves you speechless. That's how I feel when it happens to me. It leaves you speechless. It probably was a thought terminating cliche, because your thoughts terminated, in a way. It perfectly describes it. You're just like dumbfounded. You don't know what to say to that. And people say that really as a form of wrapping a conversation up in a bow. They like it. They feel good. They feel like, oh, I gave you good advice. I just really, gave you something helpful. It wasn't. It was a toxic comment that they threw out there to stop the conversation because they really don't know what else to say. Yeah, cults teach people thought terminating cliches all the time so they don't question nonsensical rules. I totally agree with you. You're going to see a lot of that in any kind of very unhealthy system. They'll have all these rules around, like, well, that's just how we do things here, something like that. And the reason they're doing that is because they don't want you to question it. You're exactly right. You got it. So BSTR said, I need to stop cutting myself down for getting into relationships like this in the first place. I so agree with you. I think one of the hard parts that we have in these is really moving through the shame, not holding ourselves responsible, realizing they're really, unfortunately, that dangerous of people out there. They're very predatory, exploitive people out there. And so becoming more compassionate to yourself, realizing that yes, we can there is a process that we can walk away and say, okay, what vulnerability of mine, what normal need of mine did I have that they tapped into that made me kind of not see some of the more bad parts of it or put up with it maybe longer than I wanted to. But so we can, after time, start to kind of look at that, deconstruct it. But I cannot emphasize strongly enough, there are really dangerous people who will tell you what you want to hear. In fact, when they catch you catching on, they'll start to use your language as a way to fool you into thinking they're changing and they're better than that. There's a great book that I cannot recommend more strongly. It's by Dr. George Simon called Character Disturbance. I really would love you if you just buy the book to read chapters 5 and 6. It is so worth it. It is gold. He talks about responsibility avoidant behavior. The problem with responsibility avoidant behavior is it looks like responsibility behavior. It looks like taking responsibility. It's the inverse. They use things that look like the right thing and they do it as a way to do the wrong thing. But we think they're doing the right thing because it looks like it. It actually isn't. It's a form of manipulation. And the way you know is over time. That's the hard part, is these people reveal themselves over time because nothing changes. That's how you know. Because if you just think, it's called character disturbance. Yeah, character disturbance is the name of the book, George Simon. If you think about it this way, okay, back to behavioral psychology. The reason behaviors happen is because they get rewarded. So we have learned some foods are really great to eat because they taste great and we get rewarded by the experience. We show up for somebody, they really like it, and they say something great that makes us great, we're more likely to do it again. But what happens with extinguishing a behavior is this. So I used to work on a dairy farm. I used to grow up on a dairy farm. So we had a fencer around the farm. It was an electric fence. The cows would come up to the fence and they had wet noses with wet hairs, and they would feel the static from the static on their nose from the fence. And they would say, oh, if I push and touch this, I'm going to get a shock. I won't do that. That's bad. Okay, so the fence goes down. Say we had a lightning storm. It hits the charger. It goes down. The fence is dead. The cow goes up to the fence, doesn't feel a static. So like, oh, I can push into the fence because the fence is down. So it learned by pushing that it can go through it. Now, how will it learn to not do that again? Well, the next time it goes up there, it'll put its nose against there like, oh, there's static. Oh, I remember that. I got a shock. I won't do that again. So you see changed behavior. When you don't see changed behavior, and usually how it happens is there's bad behavior, bad behavior, bad behavior, bad behavior, and then you start to try to change it, and when you start to put a new rule, it actually gets worse because they're pushing. They'll push against it. But if you hold your boundary and don't do anything different, you keep holding that new boundary, then you should see a drop. The behavior should drop. That's how it looks. So there's an increase, drop. If you don't see that if that pattern and behavior, then this person isn't changing. They're not changing. Something's wrong. It actually happened. So we had a kid, I used to work at a group home. We had a kid who was obnoxious. This kid was so irritating. He drove everybody in the house nuts. So nice or not nice of me, you can judge me for this. I got the whole group of kids involved and said, at the table, when he does one of his weird things, we're going to pretend he didn't. And then when he does really something wonderful, we're going to look at him and give him our full attention. Okay, so what happened? Well, when you know it, he at first did more obnoxious things briefly. He got no reaction from the group. Then he stopped because he only got good attention for his good behavior. That's how it should look. If you're not seeing that kind of change in your partner, if they're saying, let's go back to my story. Mine was going to therapy. It looked like he was going to therapy. He was taking the car. He was gone for that period of time. What I saw was increasing awareness of his bad behavior, a decrease in his manipulation, an increased sensitivity, and greater allowance for my emotionality and respect for me. I didn't see any of that. There was literally no change in his behavior at all. All the crappy behavior acted as if nothing was going on in his life that would help him change. So I should have then taken my cue and said, this guy's not changing. There's no evidence of change. So he's either not going, which was actually what he was doing. He wasn't going, either not going, not listening, or he's just, it's all faking me out. He's got a bad therapist. So that's how you know what's real. So unfortunately, they do things that look like there's going to be change and then there's no change. So pay attention over time. You should see behavior changing. Okay, Ralt Drive says, have you been studying your ex-in-laws who are so judgmental and sensitive towards your victimization that could have ended with a possible death? Yeah, it is shocking how many of us have people who are very dismissive. Now, I want to say something about your toxic partner's family. They need to believe what's happening because they have a relationship with this person. So they are invested in this person. That's why they're the worst person to look to for support. I know some of us, I thought the same. I really liked my in-laws a lot. What I didn't know until the whole thing was over was they were in on it. My in-laws were in on the deception. So really be careful about that because these are people who've known this person longer than you did. And the likelihood is they're not trustworthy. As much as they may be, seemingly pleasant people, chances are they know which side the bread is buttered on, and it's not yours. I just really want you to remember that. It's not yours. A therapist once said to me, narcissists are sprinters instead of long distance runners. Oh, I love that. Yeah, Dr. Yeah, that's really great, Isabel. That's awesome. I really love that. Yeah, so that was gold. It is gold. I agree. They created them, they want us to have them. Oh, I love that, Leanne. You're right. They created them, and then but they want us to have them. So, BSTR, you were asking what book I've been talking about. It's called Character Disturbance. Disturbance, Disturbance, Character Disturbance by George Simon. The book is by George Simon. Yeah, Lynn, I agree. We don't really need a big reason to leave. We leave because we can and we want to. It doesn't really have to be a big. I think what comes into problems with that, and speaking to me as a religious person, that we have people who've grown up with a religion have been really indoctrinated to believe that marriage is the primary state, and that if you're in it, you should do whatever you can to preserve it. So here's what I have to say to those who are in a philosophy or a religion or a culture that believes that. Yeah, maybe marriage is really an amazing state. Maybe it is a sacred state, but it needs both people putting in equal levels of investment. If you're the only one doing the work and trying to preserve the relationship, and your partner is not taking it as equal responsibility, equal accountability for it, then that's a one-sided relationship, and essentially your partner then is letting it fail. You're not letting it fail, your partner's letting it fail. I think that we do a disservice to victims when we put so much of a burden on the person who's showing up and agreeable and conscientious and doing all of this like effort and legwork. Even the Bible says, a woman like saves her husband by her godly behavior. And it kind of edifies him spiritually. I think that's inappropriate. We should not like put that kind of burden on a partner for doing that. How do you translate knowing into action in the moment, such as responding to the new person, not the abuser, when an old wound is triggered? Yeah, that's really a great question, Maria. I appreciate you asking me. Sometimes for me, it's learning to slow my reactions down so that I don't react in that moment. I actually pause. So here's what I would do, Maria. I'm caught in a bad moment. I'm realizing I don't know enough about this person to know if they're abusive, but I know that I'm being triggered and I'm feeling really upset. So I buy myself time. I would do something like say, that's really a great comment. I'm going to have to get back to you on it. I just find ways to sort of throw space in so that I can come back later and then maybe follow up when I'm in a better space. And the fact that you even recognize that the old wounds are being triggered, learn to recognize what that feels like. We may not know it in our head, but we can know what it feels like in our body. For me, my face flush, and I usually want to get defensive. I want to get hot, and I feel some anger. To me, I now know like, ooh, I'm being triggered. So learning to sort of see that can help you then slow the process down so that you can buy yourself more time, so that you can show up in a way that's helpful to you. Yeah, someone just said, I question my own judgment now. That is so common. What happens in these toxic relationships is that we end up thinking that we're good at spotting things. We're good at spotting danger. We're good at spotting lies. We really know how to get out if something going bad. And then we get in and we find out, this is trickier than I thought it was, and I'm not all that great. And I missed all the critical signs, and I'm now in a bad relationship. Yeah, and now you feel distrust with yourself. It's a process to heal from that. I know that for me, I've had to really slow down even how fast I pick friends. I'm having to be more careful I've been really slow. I tried it, dating a little bit, then stopped, and then tried again, and then stopped. I've been stopped now for a little bit of time, for over a year. And part of that is just because I need to keep building in new internal resources, get better with my own boundaries, start to feel more stable. And I hit a bad spot and then I stop and heal. I hit another bad spot and I stop and heal. So sometimes it's just kind of that kind of process. So I guess my big word for all of that is be patient. Be really patient for this. Yeah, really, really, Kimmy, I appreciate the fact that you don't blame your religion for where you're at. I don't either. Yeah, sometimes I do. I guess I take that back. I do blame it on some things. I don't really, maybe the better way for me to say is I blame sometimes the church, but I don't blame God. Maybe that's a better way for me to say it. That I do believe God loves me. He's in my corner. He wants good things for me. And I sometimes think that I don't always understand him in the way that I should. And that vulnerability made me vulnerable. So, and I remind myself that pastors are people. Not every pastor is a good person or healthy person, or maybe knows God in the way that they should. So again, to me, it's not really blaming Christianity. It's just seeing that people are ahead of church, and sometimes not the best people are ahead of churches. Yeah, but I appreciate you making that comment. It's really, Kimmy, I do appreciate that. Leanne said, I always thought I needed a partner when in reality I needed to find me. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's so true, Leanne. And I would say that's one of the critical pieces for me too, is that I've had to become my own best friend. Seriously, and I'm not saying that because it sounds great. It does sound good. But I really had to discover myself and build a relationship with myself. And I discovered when I got out of that relationship, I didn't have a relationship with myself, that I put my well-being in the context of a relationship instead of seeing my well-being need to be always in myself and good with myself, and that I can't look for that from a relationship. That's totally unrealistic to put that kind of pressure on a relationship. So many of us have lost most or many of our people due to abuse, and how people saw it. It really does take time. It does, Isabella. I would say it takes a lot of time. I know that when I walked out of that toxic relationship, I basically had to clean house. I lost about nearly all of my relationship. So if you were to look at my friendships today, you would see it's a whole new group of people. And it's people that I kind of slowly added based on understanding, based upon them being real empathic, based upon reciprocity. You know, I want to make sure things are balanced between that they show up and I show up, and there's this, mutuality to it. That I'm really paying attention. How do we handle conflict? How do we handle vulnerability? What do they do when I'm in a bad space? All of this tells me a whole lot about people and whether or not this is, and here's the other thing. I used to think I have a friendship or I don't have a friendship. Now I see friendships differently. I see friendships as something like it's a constant build. Like, and at any point I may get new information that really changes the scope of something. Because honestly, we have to sort of see what happens over time. We have to let relationships get challenged. They don't get challenged right away. Often it takes a long time for us to see if there can be repair. What I really want to know about somebody is that they have the ability to understand that there can be disconnection, and then they know how to repair the breach. That to me says this is a really great relationship, when they know how to repair a breach. Yeah, so I realize that I need some company and validation. So now I need to learn how to do that and being okay with myself. I agree. I think that's a really great thing to learn to show up for yourself. That's amazing. I do. It does. I agree with you, Echo Chamber. It does take working through a lot of self-loathing and really learning how to let go of shame, of not being so hard on ourselves. It really takes a lot of that work. Preventative maintenance works great before we get anxiety. For me, acting out on my emotions is a good way that helps, rather than in a meditative way. That's interesting, Pete, don't repeat. That's interesting what you're saying. I'm not sure I quite follow what you're saying, but I do think it's interesting. It's okay to laugh. Absolutely, it is okay to laugh. All right, so next week, I plan to show up guys, I made a decision. I'm going to show up through the holidays. I'm going to still be here every Tuesday. So I'll be here next week, even though it's the week of Christmas. And I'll be back for the week of New Year's as well. And I already even know what those topics are. So let me tell you what those topics are. So next week, we are going to be talking about, next week is how to survive the holidays filled with narcissists. So if you're looking for a holiday survival guide and you're getting ready to go to your, Christmas party with family or whatever it is, or maybe you're going to be hanging out alone. By the way, if you are going to be hanging out alone, then I want you to join the Toxic Free Relationship Club, because we're meeting the day after Christmas to watch a rom-com with our favorite adult beverage and hanging out. So if you have no other place to go and no one to be with, you can hang out with us on Christmas Eve for the club coaching meeting, because we're meeting that night. And then you can hang out the day after Christmas, hang out with us again and watch a rom-com for fun. And if you say, again, Kerry, I can't afford the $75 a month, then you've not come and talked to me, because the budget should not be a reason that you can't be a part of this membership. You already know, I told you I make allowances for that. So that's next week. The Holiday Survival Guide when you have to be facing a bunch of narcissists. And for New Year's Eve, we're going to talk about everything you've ever wanted to know about a trauma bond. So everything you've ever wanted to know about a trauma bond. So that will be the week of the New Year's. Hey, thank you so much, guys, for today, for hanging out with me. I appreciate it so much. This was wonderful, just really wonderful. Oh, Lynn, you have a fan over on YouTube. Somebody said, Roll Drive said they love your videos. They've been really great. All right, you guys, take it easy. I will see you next week. Don't go into the holidays alone. Please don't. Reach out to me, sign up. I'm offering a special deal on the Toxic Free Relationship Club. If you sign up for a year, you get your first month free, and you get every subsequent month for the rest of the year at 25% off. It's called my holiday special, and I'm going to make sure the link is in the show notes for today's YouTube. So if you're looking for membership and you want to get the first month free and you're really needing just not to be alone, please check out that link. All right, you guys, take it easy. I will see you next week as we head into the holiday seasons. All right, bye-bye.